You've probably heard people throw around the term Trump Derangement Syndrome, but what if I told you that what started as political name-calling might actually reveal something much deeper about how our brains react to political figures? So you're scrolling through social media and you see two people having a heated argument about politics. One person is so worked up they can't even have a normal conversation anymore. The other person says, "That's just Trump Derangement Syndrome talking." But here's the thing, this isn't just some made-up insult. There might actually be real psychology behind what's happening. Today, we're going to dig into whether Trump Derangement Syndrome is actually real, what science tells us about extreme political reactions, and why understanding this matters for all of us. Let me start with a story that might sound familiar. Picture this. It's Thanksgiving dinner, 2023. Your uncle, who used to be pretty reasonable, suddenly can't stop talking about politics. Every conversation somehow turns into a rant. Your aunt rolls her eyes and says he's got Trump Derangement Syndrome. But then your cousin jumps in and says the same thing about people on the other side who defend everything without question. Sound familiar? This exact scenario is playing out in millions of homes across America. But what's really going on here? Is this actually a real condition, or just people using fancy words to dismiss opinions they don't like? First, let's get our facts straight. Trump Derangement Syndrome, or TDS as people call it, isn't listed in any official medical book. The term was originally coined by political commentator Charles Krauthammer back in 2003, but he was actually talking about critics of George W. Bush. Later, it got recycled and applied to reactions about Donald Trump. According to various sources, TDS is described as extreme negative reactions to Trump that seem to go beyond normal political disagreement. We're talking about reactions that appear irrational and don't seem to be based on actual policies or facts. But here's where it gets interesting. Critics say the term is just used to shut down legitimate criticism and avoid real political debates. Dr. Rob Whitley, who's published over 100 papers in social psychiatry, makes an interesting point. He says that just because something isn't in the official diagnostic manual doesn't mean it's not real. Think about it. We all know what burnout feels like, even though it's not technically a mental disorder. We understand what a nervous breakdown is, even though you won't find it in any medical textbook. So, what does science actually tell us about extreme political reactions? Well, it turns out there's a whole field of research looking at something called political polarization and how it affects our brains and behavior. Research from institutions like Carnegie Endowment shows that people often overestimate how extreme the other side really is. When we think the other political party is full of extremists who want to destroy democracy, we're more likely to react with extreme emotions ourselves. It becomes a cycle that keeps feeding itself. Studies on affective polarization, that's fancy talk for emotional reactions to politics, show that our brains literally process political information differently when we're highly polarized. We become more likely to dismiss facts that don't fit our views and accept information that confirms what we already believe, even when that information might not be accurate. Here's something that might surprise you. Research published in Nature Reviews Psychology found that healthy democracies need some disagreement and competition between ideas. But when people become so polarized that they see politics as us versus them instead of different ideas about how to make things better, that's when democracy itself is at risk. Now, here's where things get really interesting. The psychological mechanisms behind extreme political reactions aren't unique to any one political figure or party. Scientists have identified patterns that show up regardless of which politician someone loves or hates. When people feel like their group identity is under threat, their brains activate the same regions that light up during physical danger. This isn't metaphorical. Your brain literally thinks you're being attacked. No wonder people get so emotional about politics that they can't think straight or have normal conversations anymore. Group polarization research shows that when like-minded people get together, their views naturally become more extreme over time. Social media makes this even worse because algorithms show us content that makes us angry or confirms what we already believe. It's like putting polarization on steroids. But here's the thing that makes this whole Trump derangement syndrome debate so complicated. It works both ways. Some people have extreme negative reactions to Trump that seem to go beyond normal political disagreement. But other people have extreme positive reactions that also seem to ignore facts or policies. Both sides accuse the other of being deranged. Recent research on meta-perceptions, how we think other people see us, shows that both Republicans and Democrats think the other side views them much more negatively than they actually do. This creates a spiral where people preemptively get defensive or aggressive because they assume the worst about the other side's intentions. Let's talk about what this looks like in real life. Someone with extreme political reactions might find themselves unable to maintain friendships with people who disagree with them politically. They might spend hours every day consuming political content that makes them angry. They might find themselves getting into arguments with strangers online or feeling genuinely distressed when they hear certain political news. Does this sound like anyone you know? Maybe even yourself sometimes? The fascinating thing is that these patterns show up throughout history. During the Civil War, people had similar extreme reactions. During the Cold War, some Americans became so afraid of communism that they saw communist plots everywhere. Every generation seems to have political issues that make some people react in ways that seem over the top to others. Now, here's a recent development that shows how seriously some people are taking this topic. Just this month, Representative Warren Davidson introduced something called the TDS Research Act of 2025. This bill would direct the National Institutes of Health to actually study Trump Derangement Syndrome and try to understand its psychological and social roots. Whether or not this bill goes anywhere, the fact that elected officials are talking about this shows how much these extreme political reactions are affecting real people's lives and relationships. So let's get to the big question. Is Trump Derangement Syndrome actually real? The answer is, complicated. As a specific medical condition? No. There's no official diagnosis, no standard treatment, no clear criteria for what counts as TDS versus normal political disagreement. But as a description of extreme political reactions that go beyond normal disagreement and start affecting people's ability to think clearly or maintain relationships, well, that might be real. And it might not be limited to reactions about Trump. Think about it this way. If someone becomes so consumed with negative thoughts about any political figure that they can't sleep, can't maintain relationships, or can't function normally in their daily life, then something real is happening, regardless of what we call it. The research on political polarization and extreme emotional reactions to politics suggests that our brains can get stuck in patterns that aren't healthy for us or for democracy as a whole. But here's what's really important to understand. Recognizing that extreme political reactions might be a real phenomenon doesn't mean we should dismiss all political criticism as derangement. There's a difference between having strong political opinions based on facts and policies and having emotional reactions that seem disconnected from reality or that make it impossible to have normal conversations. The key is being honest with ourselves about when our political reactions might be helping us make good decisions and when they might be hurting our relationships and our ability to think clearly. Scientists studying political psychology suggest a few warning signs that your political reactions might be getting extreme. If you find yourself unable to see any good in people who disagree with you politically, if you're spending so much time on political content that it's affecting your work or relationships, If you find yourself getting into fights with friends and family over politics, or if political news is causing you genuine distress that lasts for days or weeks, none of this means you should stop caring about politics or stop having strong opinions. Democracy needs people who care and who are willing to engage with important issues. But it does mean we might need to be more aware of when our political emotions are helping us be better citizens and when they might be making us less effective at actually creating positive change. Research shows that people who can maintain some emotional distance from politics while still staying engaged are actually more effective at persuading others and building coalitions for change. When we're in a state of constant emotional reaction, we're not thinking strategically about how to actually make things better. Here's something interesting that might give us hope. Studies on political depolarization show that when people from different political backgrounds actually sit down and have structured conversations where they listen to each other, a lot of the extreme emotions start to fade. It turns out that much of our political anger is based on assumptions about what other people believe rather than what they actually believe. Most Americans, regardless of their political party, want similar things: safe communities, good opportunities for their kids, a decent standard of living, and a government that works. We disagree about how to achieve these things, but the fundamental goals aren't that different. So what does all this mean for the Trump Derangement Syndrome debate? Maybe the real question isn't whether TDS is a real medical condition, but whether we as a society are developing healthier ways to disagree about politics without letting those disagreements destroy our relationships and our ability to work together on shared problems. The research suggests that extreme political reactions, whether positive or negative, about Trump or any other political figure, often say more about our psychological state and our social environment than they do about the political figure themselves. We live in a time when political content is designed to make us angry because angry people click and share more. We live in communities that are often politically homogeneous, so we don't get much practice having respectful disagreements. We get most of our political information from sources that confirm what we already believe, rather than challenging us to think differently. All of these factors create perfect conditions for extreme political reactions, regardless of which politicians we're reacting to. But here's the good news. Understanding the psychology behind extreme political reactions gives us tools to respond differently. We can recognize when we're getting caught up in emotional reactions that aren't serving us well. We can choose to engage with political information in ways that help us think more clearly, rather than just making us more angry. We can practice having political conversations where the goal is understanding, rather than winning. And we can remember that the people who disagree with us politically are still human beings with hopes and fears and dreams that probably aren't that different from our own. Whether we call it Trump Derangement Syndrome or just recognize it as extreme political polarization, the real issue is how we create a society where people can disagree about important things without losing their ability to see each other as fellow human beings. The research shows that this is possible, but it requires effort from all of us to step back from the emotional intensity of politics sometimes and remember that democracy works best when people can disagree respectfully and still find ways to work together on shared challenges. So is Trump Derangement Syndrome real? Maybe the better question is, are we ready to have more honest conversations about how politics affects our mental health and our relationships, regardless of which political figures we're talking about? The answer to that question might determine not just our individual well-being, but the future of democracy itself. If this video helped you think differently about political reactions and polarization, check out the next video where we explore practical strategies for having better political conversations with people who disagree with you.